Today, we're gonna talk about lighting, but not just about how to use ambient light or even lighting techniques. We're definitely gonna get into all of that a little bit later in the video, but more on why and how lighting can impact the story by breaking down this day scene, which was actually shot at night. Hey, what's happening everyone? My name is Ryan, and if you're new with us, welcome. I truly appreciate you being here. All right, let's get into it. Now we're definitely gonna get into breaking down that scene, but to fully understand how this works, we first need to understand why lighting is important in the filmmaking process of visual storytelling. So let's talk about that. There are many reasons why lighting can be super important, but we're not gonna be able to get into all of them into this video. So today we're just gonna cover the main three that I'm usually thinking about when making some of my films. The first is establishing the time and the place that this character is in the events that are happening within the scene. Lighting can play a huge role in establishing where we are and what time of day our character is in. For example, warm lighting that's shining through the window straight at our character could imply that this is early morning or even late in the evening as our character is wrapping up the day. And on the flip side, having a dimly lit interior could imply that this scene is happening at night. All of this can be a very subtle but very powerful way to establish the location and the time of the events that are happening within the scene. And the second reason is because the way you light the scene will directly impact the mood and the emotion of the scene. There are so many different lighting techniques that can create an array of emotional responses from your audience. Now, this really just depends on the context. For example, nice warm lighting can imply comfort and intimacy, while a dark, cold lit scene can imply that there's tension, which can create a sense of uneasiness. And the third reason is just to define who our characters are, or the main point of interest is within the scene. If you've been watching the channel for some time, you've probably heard me say that the main point of interest is usually gonna be the thing that stands out in the frame the most. Most of the time, this is gonna mean the subject is the most well lit, and that is the person that your eye is gonna naturally go to when looking at any scene. The same can be said for the flip side of that. When you're backlighting somebody, their silhouette can stand out more than everything else, so your eye focuses on that character, making them the main point of interest. Lighting is a really great way to just shape the objects or the characters to really highlight who they are, what they're doing, and further focus our interest on what's important within the scene. Again, these are just a few of the things that I'm usually thinking about. There are a whole list of things to think about when using lighting in visual storytelling. However, we can't fit it all into this video, so if you'd like to learn more and you'd like to see a part 2 on this topic, then let us know in the comments down below, because I love connecting with you guys and I'd love to make that video for you guys. Now, this is all great and super important, but if you're anything like me and you need a visual to fully understand how we could use lighting to elevate the story, then stick with me because we're gonna get into that next. First, let's see how the room naturally looks at actual day. Okay, so here I am in the room that we're gonna be lighting up today. Right now, it is actual daylight time, and as you can see, it looks okay. It definitely works. If this is all you had to work with, this would definitely work for your scene, as long as you are, shooting on the shadow side and your window's not blown out. However, it is very bright today, so my window is completely blown out, and my ND filter is at its limit. So we have harsh lighting behind me, and the shadows on me just aren't great. Now, one way to combat this is just to film during the golden hour, and that is if the sun is shining through the window at the exact angle that you need it. Again, I mentioned this before, but golden hour really isn't that long, so there are a lot of limitations there. I actually have a whole video about it and how you could use golden hour and blue hour to enhance your story, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested in learning more. But any way you slice it, it's always going to be difficult to use natural light. Maybe it takes you a couple of hours to shoot the scene. The sunlight is gonna be coming from a different direction at that point. And also too, if it's a cloudy day, you have inconsistent light, which just makes the process that much harder. So how do you control all that? Well, this is where lighting comes into play and how it can help shape the story. Now, you could just bring in some additional light and some modifiers to really hone and dial in this natural light look, but if you wanted to have full control over your lighting, you may consider filming a night for day scene. This is when you would film a day scene at night, bringing all of your lighting in and shaping the room to create the illusion that this scene is taking place at daytime. Now, when you're shooting a scene at night, it definitely takes a lot of lights to make the scene at at least feel normal. My main focus is to try and light the scene to where it looks like it was during the day, but I have full control now over the scene. Let's talk about what lights I'm using. I use the Aperture 120D Mark II, the Amaran 60X. I used a tube light by Ambitful, it's the A2. I also used the Aperture MLA9 and the Aperture ALMX. But how did I use all those lights to create this day scene at night? Well, I'm gonna break that down for you next, so let's get into that. All right, so let's start to break down the lighting and see how we can shape this room to convey the emotion and the tone for our scene. For our main light, I decided to backlight the subject, and this is just to add a little bit of mood, a little bit more of that emotion. For that light, I just used the Aperture 120D Mark II. This is an older light, I've had it forever. Now, this isn't the most powerful light, and because we're trying to emulate the sun, I had to crank it up to about 90%. This also isn't a bicolor light, so I decided to throw a CTO, a color temperature orange gel on top of that, and I just taped it to the barn doors. I used the barn doors to direct the light to a bounce card. This bounce card is just on a C-stand at an angle to kind of emulate the way the sun would spill in at this time of day naturally. Bouncing this light onto this card gave me a much softer look. After that, I just closed the shears to kind of hide that lighting setup a little bit more. Now, I should note that I'm actually working with very little lighting. I only had a few things with me, and a lot of the other stuff is set up elsewhere. So in true fashion, I'm really just piecing this together with what was available to me. And I only have a few more lights that I can use. However, I had a lot of space to fill, so let's talk about that. I just took my Amaran 60X. This is just a smaller bicolor light, but because it's bicolor, it did allow me to kind of get a little bit more warmth for the time of day that I was trying to emulate here. I definitely had to crank this one up to 100%, and I threw the Aperture Light Dome Mini on that one and faced that towards the corner. Now, this was doing a few things. Number one, it was helping me to soften that light even more by putting a softbox on it and then directing it to the wall, letting it kind of bounce and spill all over the room, giving me a softer lighting. But it was also bouncing off the wall in many different directions, giving us that illusion that actual sunlight is coming through those windows. For this dining room area, I knew I was gonna have to fill out the room so that you could see me, the subject, and I had the perfect light to do that, this tiny little tube light that I have. This is the Ambitful A2, I think it's an Amazon tube light. The biggest problem I'm having right now is that Ambitful tube light. It's giving off these shadows that don't look very natural. And so I need to find a way to get those harsher shadows out of the shot. So let's see what kind of creative solution we can come up with to make that happen. Now, luckily I found a spot out of sight and cranked this light up to 100% as well. I think I set it to about 3,800 Kelvin. I actually set all of my lighting to around this color temperature. So this was starting to take shape and look really good, but I noticed that the kitchen and the mudroom back there were still dark. To remedy that, I used these small little aperture lights, and I put one in the kitchen and put one in the mudroom. I set them both to warmer color temperatures and cranked those up as well to 100%. And that seemed to work out really great. And as an added bonus, the light in the kitchen was reflecting, getting this, little reflection of light on the microwave. And that kind of, to me, just further gave the illusion that there's actual sunlight peeking through these windows. It looked that way, at least to me personally. So I just pumped in a little bit of haze to add a little more depth. And here is the final look. Now, of course, both shots and both methods can work really great. However, when you place our day shot side by side with our night for day shot, you could start to see how having control over the light can absolutely help you have full control over how the lighting can impact the viewer and the way they perceive the story. Because lighting is so commonly overlooked, I totally ignored it at the beginning of my journey as a filmmaker, for sure, which looking back at those projects now, wow. And the way we light our films and videos will definitely impact the way it's perceived. And by understanding light in the context of visual storytelling and working to be intentional about how you implement them into your scene, not only will this elevate your films, but this will also make your work stand out from all the rest. So as always on this channel, I just want to encourage you to grab a few friends, maybe some family members, and try some of these techniques out for yourself. Practice them often, and in due time, you'll start to see the results you're looking for before you know it. Well, that's gonna do it for me, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. If you like this video or you learned something, please click the like button down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, friends.